Hey guys, Tom here from synthhacker.com and welcome back to yet another X4 Records Serum tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to be looking at making this really massive huge Supersaw sound. Absolutely huge, absolutely massive, and I know generally supersaws might not seem like the most complicated sound, but there's actually a lot of intricate details that go into making them, and there's like really small differences, really small things that you can do that can make a huge difference to the quality of the sound, which I'm going to be going over, and some really important stuff if you know, these are the type of sounds that you're going to be creating. So they're quite, like, supersaw is probably most common in like trance. A lot of like big kind of like big room house, or like kind of more commercial house, like EDM, that kind of stuff uses supersaws a lot. Even like some like electro house tracks and like breakdowns occasionally. Just like this is kind of one of those like sounds which is kind of universal across a lot of different genres. But nevertheless, you will get a lot out of this tutorial. Anyway, like just for creating these type of sounds and just some general knowledge about Serum as well. So we're going to be making this sound completely from scratch, so let's initialize the preset. And just quickly before I get into starting making the sound, I'll just mention that is one of the presets from my mega pack for Serum, my preset mega pack, which you can go check out over at synthhacker.com or in the link in the description below if that's something that interests you. Contains over 600 presets for Serum, all handcrafted by me over the last like year or so, since basically ever since Serum came out. And yeah, I think you'll get a lot of use out of those presets. There's audio demos on there to check out if you're interested, over at synthhacker.com or the link in the description below. And thanks in advance if you decide to purchase that. It really helps support me and the channel. But anyway, let's go ahead and start creating this sound. So the first thing to mention is that it's a 2 oscillator sound, or 3 oscillator, including the use of the noise oscillator as well. The wavetable we're going to be using is one of my favourite wavetables for this kind of sound, which is this hypersaw kind of waveform. It's a bit like a saw wave, but it's like slightly curved. There's something about it, it's really hard to kind of pinpoint exactly what it is about it that makes me prefer it over a saw. I think because it's kind of got this like rounded edge, like the smooth edge, the sound has like a bit more body. It's like really hard to explain. But you can either use this, or you could go ahead and use a saw wave. You could just mess about with both and see which you prefer. But I would recommend sticking with this hypersaw. The next thing we're going to do is make sure that oscillator B is an octave above oscillator A. Otherwise there'd be little point in doing this unless we were like detuning them slightly. But the reason for this is basically just to fill out the frequency range a bit. Supersaws, like generally in a mix, fill out a large portion of the mix and really kind of dominate it. There's not really usually much else going on when a supersaw is like in the mix. So making sure that it fills out the frequency range is really important. And the main ways we're doing this in the sound is by having the oscillators be 2 octaves apart, so they both kind of occupy separate frequency ranges, and then also the inclusion of the noise oscillator as well. The next thing I'm going to do is make sure, and I will kind of demonstrate what this sounds like after doing this, but the next thing I'm going to do is increase the unison of each of these oscillators, which is really key. Now I do kind of want to talk about this a little bit, because this is one of the key elements that I was talking about earlier that can like make or break the sound. Now unison, I'll just quickly explain what it is for those who don't know. So unison is basically the amount of voices that each oscillator is outputting. So essentially we're hearing 7 different, every time a note is played, we're hearing 7 different versions of this waveform, all slightly detuned so we can like tell them apart. Or it kind of like gives the illusion that the sound is like bigger than it is, and it really thickens it up. Now a lot of people with that knowledge then go, okay, well let's push it up to, you know, 16 voices, and then that will make it sound bigger. And like, although that's not that like it's not really daft thinking, like a lot of people, like it's safe to assume that a lot of people would think that. The best results I find are usually about 7, and there is actually some proof behind this. If you check the manual in the for Serum, Steve writes in there that he mentions like 7 is kind of like the magic number for Unison, and if you like Google it as well, there's a lot of articles saying this, and stuff like sound designers that agree with this. And the reason is, without boring you too much, is because if you have too many voices of Unison, what starts to happen is the image of the sound becomes a bit blurry, and it starts becoming harder to tell these sounds apart. So then that illusion of the sound being thicker kind of breaks down. So generally you want to stick to around 7 voices. The next thing we're going to do is just bring the detune of oscillator A down a little bit, but we're going to keep the detune of oscillator B higher. I always find that it sounds better for the higher octave oscillator to be more detuned than oscillator A. Then the oscillator A then is a little bit more coherent, gives it the main body of the sound, and then you can get away with having like a more detuned, like higher octave oscillator. So this is what we have so far. Just bring down the volume a little bit. The next thing we're going to do is just set up our amplitude envelope. We're going to bring the sustain down a little bit, and then we're going to change the curve. So we've got this kind of like sharp little pluck at the beginning. This just adds like a little bit of attack to the sound. I'm just going to increase the attack a little bit though, just to soften it up. But the reason for this is because we're also going to use this envelope to modulate the cutoff, and it's just going to add a nice bit of like sharp attack to the sound, but like really kind of subtly. And we're just going to give it a little bit of release as well. Next thing we're going to do, go into the noise oscillator. We're going to set up some bright white noise. As I said, the Supersaw is going to be like the main element in a mix whenever it's playing. So any technique we can use to kind of fill out the frequency content of the sound is really useful. And I've just dragged and dropped oscillator 3 onto there. We're just going to give it its own amplitude envelope, which is going to have slightly less sustain than the rest of the sound. And we're just going to bring the level down a bit. We don't want it to completely dominate the sound. Next, we're going to go into the filter section. We're just going to use the generic low pass 12 dB of filter. Make sure everything is being routed through. We don't need to worry about the sub because that's not even switched on. And then we're going to drag and drop the envelope we set up on envelope 1 onto the cutoff. And now we have this. Let me just set this up. Okay, so now we have this. So we're really getting there now. I'm just going to move the sustain up a little bit because the effect that it's having on the cutoff is a little too extreme, and I'm going to bring the resonance down a little bit as well. And the other thing I'm going to do is actually change this to a low pass 6 dB filter. This is actually just so that essentially all you need to know about the different types of low pass filters is that the higher the number, the more extreme the filter. So if we have just the low pass 6 dB filter, it's only 6 dB of roll off per octave. So this means that essentially more like high frequencies are going to come through, which we want. So that pretty much covers the main section of the sound so far. What we're going to do now is dive into the effects. So we're going to make a lot of use out of this hyperdimension effect. So it's split into 2 parts essentially. You've got the hyper section and the dimension, and some sounds you use just one, and some sounds you can use both. Just give me a second. So the next thing we're going to do then is bring the mix down on the hyper effect just slightly, but we are going to be using this. So essentially, like I was talking about Unison earlier in both these octaves, this is essentially like Unison, but the sound as a whole rather than just the individual oscillators. And then what we're going to do also is just really increase the mix amount of this dimension and bring the size down. The dimension expander essentially uses like delayed versions of the sound to make it sound bigger than it actually is. So now we have this. So that really helps kind of make the sound as big as possible, which we obviously want from like an epic supersaw like this. The next thing I'm going to do is go into the compressor. We're going to use a bit of multiband compression, just increase the gain a little bit. We're going to give it quite a lot of release and just bring the master volume down a little bit because this does boost the volume. And that really helps bring out some of the like highs out, makes it sound much brighter, which we obviously want from a sound like this. You can kind of adjust how much effect this has on the sound by reducing or increasing the gain. The thing to make sure that you do is adjust the master volume as well, because this will kind of cause like fluctuations in volume. The next thing we're going to do is just add some reverb. We're going to high cut it a little bit to take some of the harshness out of the reverb. We're going to low cut it so that the muddy low end doesn't get routed through. And then we're going to add an EQ at the end of the chain. Bring this Q amount down, and we'll just have it set up like this, just to roll off some of the low end, which we definitely don't want in a sound like this. And this is our finished sound. So hopefully you got a lot of use out of this. I would probably recommend using an external reverb rather than Serum's, just because I'm not too keen on the inbuilt reverb within Serum. But hopefully, nevertheless, you got a lot of use out of this tutorial. If you want to stay up to date with new tutorials, including trance sounds in the future, as well as other genres, definitely be sure to subscribe. This is a great way to support me and the channel. Also, if you haven't already, as I mentioned, go ahead and check out synthhacker.com, which is my website, or click the link in the description below. I have, in the mega pack that I mentioned earlier, there's a whole section dedicated to trance and progressive house with loads of sounds like this. So definitely go ahead and check that out. Leave a like if you got some use out of the video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below in the comments. And thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.